When Sheriff Boone kicked open the saloon doors that frozen January night, dragging a blizzard and a death warrant inside, nobody expected what happened next. He pointed at the Chinese woman sitting alone in the corner, a stranger with eyes like cut glass and secrets that could burn down empires. She should have died right there. She would have, if Cole Mercer hadn't opened his mouth and told the most reckless lie of his life. "She's my wife, Ishtiya." 3 words that saved her. 3 words that damned them both. What started as a desperate bluff became something neither of them could control. A fake marriage that felt too real, a truth buried in snow and silence, and a reckoning that would shake the entire territory. This is their story. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Because what happened next? Nobody saw it coming. The town of Broken Ridge wasn't much to look at on a good day. On a bad one, when the wind came howling down from the mountains and the snow turned the world into a white hell, it looked like the kind of place God forgot about halfway through creation and never bothered finishing. Tonight was one of those nights. Cole Mercer sat at the back table of McReady's saloon, nursing whiskey that tasted like saddle leather and watching ice crystals form on the inside of the window. The stove in the corner did its best, belching heat and smoke in equal measure, but the cold always won eventually. It always did out here. He'd come into town for supplies, flour, salt, ammunition, lamp oil, the kind of things that kept a man alive through a Montana winter when he lived 15 miles from the nearest human being. He should have been halfway home by now, but the storm had blown in fast and mean, turning the road into a death trap. So he'd taken a room upstairs, paid for 3 days in advance, and settled in to wait. The saloon was maybe a third full, a handful of ranch hands playing cards near the stove. Old Murphy at the bar, already drunk enough that he'd started crying into his beer about his dead wife, same as every Saturday. 2 miners arguing about whether the vein they'd found was silver or fool's gold. The usual crowd. And her. She'd walked in maybe an hour ago, silent as smoke. Nobody heard the door. Nobody saw her come in. She was just suddenly there, sitting at a corner table with her back to the wall and her hands folded in her lap. Chinese. That was the first thing everyone noticed. You didn't see many Chinese folks this far north. Not anymore. Most had moved on after the railroad work dried up, heading for the coast or back to California. The ones who stayed kept their heads down and their mouths shut. She wasn't keeping her head down. She sat straight-backed in a black wool coat that had seen better years, her dark hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her face was still, smooth, unreadable, like carved stone. She didn't order anything, didn't speak, just sat there, watching the room with eyes that missed nothing. McReady had tried to get her to leave. "No food, no drink, no reason to be here," he'd said, not unkindly, just stating facts. She'd looked at him, really looked at him, and McReady had backed off without another word. Cole had never seen that before. McReady was a hard man, ex-cavalry, with scars on his scars. He didn't back down from anyone, but he'd backed down from her. After that, people left her alone. They stared, sure, whispered, but nobody approached. There was something about her that made men reconsider their choices. Something cold and final, like standing too close to the edge of a cliff. Cole understood that feeling. He'd spent the last 3 years trying to shake it himself. He was reaching for his glass when the doors exploded inward. Not opened, exploded. They hit the walls with a crack like thunder, and the wind came screaming through, bringing snow and ice and the smell of horse sweat. Every conversation died. Every head turned. Sheriff Boone stood in the doorway. He was a big man, built like a bull, with a face that looked like it had been kicked by one. His badge caught the lamplight, and the star on his chest might as well have been a target the way he wore it, proud, daring someone to take a shot. Behind him, 2 deputies. Younger. Nervous? Hands hovering near their guns. Boone's eyes swept the room, slow and deliberate, like a man counting cattle before the slaughter. When they landed on the woman in black, they stopped. "There she is," his voice carried, deep, certain. The kind of voice that didn't expect arguments. The woman didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, watching him with those unreadable eyes. Cole's hand tightened on his glass. This wasn't his business, wasn't his problem. He'd learned a long time ago that the best way to survive was to keep your head down and your nose clean. Whatever trouble this woman had brought to Broken Ridge, it had nothing to do with him. Boone stepped forward, boots heavy on the wooden floor. Mei Lin, also known as Mei Lin, also known as the Black Lily. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. Got a warrant here says you're wanted for theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Says you're to be detained and transported to territorial jurisdiction for trial. The room held its breath. The woman, Mei Lin, didn't deny it, didn't defend herself, just sat there, still as death. You're coming with me, Boone said. Easy or hard, your choice. That's when Cole Mercer did the stupidest thing he'd ever done in his entire stupid life. He stood up. The chair scraped loud in the silence. Every eye turned to him now, including Boone's. Problem, Mercer? The sheriff's voice had an edge to it. They had history, him and Cole. Not good history. Cole's heart hammered against his ribs. His mouth was dry. What the hell was he doing? Yeah, he heard himself say. There's a problem. Boone's hand drifted toward his gun. That's so. Cole walked forward. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like a man who'd already made up his mind and was too stubborn to back down. He stopped between the sheriff and the woman, close enough that Boone would have to go through him to get to her. That woman, Cole said, and his voice sounded strange in his own ears, rough, like he hadn't used it in too long. She's my wife. The silence that followed was absolute. Somewhere, a log shifted in the stove. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, nobody breathed. Boone's eyes narrowed. Your wife. That's right. You've been living alone on that ranch of yours for 3 years, Mercer. Everyone knows it. Hell, you're famous for it. The hermit of Broken Ridge. And now you're telling me you've got a wife? Cole forced himself to meet Boone's stare. I'm telling you she's my wife. Been married 2 months. Kept it quiet because it wasn't anybody's damn business but ours. 2 months. That's right. And you just happened to bring her into town tonight, in the middle of a blizzard, to sit in a saloon, alone. Cole's mind raced. He was in it now, no backing out. She wanted to see the town. I was getting supplies, told her to wait here while I finished up. He shrugged, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Storm came in faster than expected. Boone looked past him at Mei Lin. She still hadn't moved, hadn't confirmed or denied a word of it. That true? Boone asked her. This man your husband? The room waited. Mei Lin's eyes moved from Boone to Cole. They were dark eyes, deep as wells, and just as cold. For a long moment she said nothing. Cole could feel his pulse in his throat. If she denied it, he was done. Boone would arrest her, and probably him too for obstruction. He'd be lucky if he only lost his ranch. Then Mei Lin spoke. Yes. One word. Quiet. Certain. Boone's jaw tightened. You got proof? Marriage certificate? Witness? Filed in Helena, Cole said, the lie coming easier now. 2 months ago, like I said, Reverend Patterson performed the ceremony. You can wire and confirm if you want, but the lines are down because of the storm, and they'll be down for days. It was a good lie. Specific, checkable, but not immediately. The kind of lie that bought time. Boone knew it too. Cole could see the calculation in his eyes. He could push this, make an issue of it. But if Cole was telling the truth, and he had no immediate way to prove otherwise, arresting a man's wife based on a warrant that might not even apply anymore would cause problems. Big problems. The kind that territorial governors heard about. She's wanted for crimes committed under a different name, Boone said slowly. Before she married you. Don't know anything about that, Cole said. Only know she's my wife now. Married legal. Which means she's under my protection, and any warrant you've got needs to be verified before you go dragging her off into the night. The two men stared at each other. Cole could smell the leather and gun oil, could see the vein pulsing in Boone's temple. The sheriff was thinking, weighing, deciding how much trouble this was worth. Finally, Boone folded the warrant and put it back in his coat. You're vouching for her, he said. Not a question, a statement. I am. You understand what that means? If she runs, if she causes trouble, it comes back on you, your ranch, your name, everything. I understand. Boone looked at Mei Lin one more time. 2 days. he said. "I'll give you 2 days to produce proof of this marriage. After that, warrant or no warrant, if I don't see documentation, I'm taking her in. Clear?" "Clear." The sheriff turned and walked out, his deputies following. The doors swung shut behind them, muffling the wind. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then McCready let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." The room erupted in whispers. Cole ignored them. He turned to look at Mei Lin, and for the first time, he saw something in her face that might have been surprise. "You shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "Probably not. You don't know me. Don't know what I've done." "Don't care." Her eyes searched his face, looking for something. "Why?" Cole didn't have a good answer. Didn't have any answer, really. He'd acted on instinct, on some stupid impulse that he couldn't explain even to himself. Maybe it was because she'd been sitting there alone, and he knew what alone felt like. Maybe it was because Boone rubbed him the wrong way, and always had. Maybe it was because he'd spent 3 years doing nothing, being nothing, and some part of him needed to matter again, even if it was just for a moment. "Because he pointed a gun at you," Cole said finally, "and I didn't like it." It was the truth, or close enough. Mei Lin stood. She was shorter than he'd expected, barely came up to his shoulder, but there was nothing small about the way she held herself. "I need to leave," she said. "Tonight, before he comes back. Can't. Storm's too bad. You'd be dead before you made it a mile." "Then I'll wait until morning." "Morning won't be any better. This storm's settling in. Could be days before the road's clear." She looked toward the window at the wall of white beyond the glass. Her jaw tightened. "I can't stay here. If he finds out you lied, he will find out, eventually, which is why we need to make it true." She turned back to him, sharp. "What?" "Not really married," Cole clarified, "but we need to act like it, at least until we figure out what comes next. You stay at my ranch. We play the part. Give Boone no reason to question it. You're insane. Probably. But you got a better option?" Mei Lin said nothing, because she didn't. They both knew it. Cole gestured toward the stairs. "I've got a room. You can stay there tonight. I'll sleep in the stable. Tomorrow, when there's a break in the weather, we head to my ranch. It's isolated. No neighbors for miles. You'll be safe there." "Why would you do this?" Her voice was hard, suspicious. "What do you want?" "Nothing. Everyone wants something." Cole thought about that. About the empty house waiting for him. About the silence that had become so heavy he could barely breathe under it anymore. About the person he used to be before the war, before the losses, before he'd buried everything that mattered and pretended it was fine. "Maybe I just want to do one decent thing," he said, "before I forget how." Mei Lin studied him for a long time, looking for the lie, the angle, the trap. Cole let her look. He had nothing to hide, nothing left to lose either. Finally she nodded. "Once. Sharp. One night," she said. "Then we talk." "Fair enough." She walked past him toward the stairs. At the bottom she paused and looked back. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Even if it was foolish." Then she was gone, disappearing up the steps like a shadow. Cole stood there, aware of the eyes on him, the whispers building. He walked back to his table, drained the rest of his whiskey, and tried to ignore the feeling that he'd just set something in motion that he couldn't stop. McCready appeared beside him, wiping down a glass that didn't need wiping. "You've lost your mind, Mercer." "Yep." "That woman's trouble, the kind that gets people killed." "Yep." "And you just tied yourself to her, in front of witnesses, including the sheriff." "Yep." McCready shook his head. "What the hell were you thinking?" Cole looked down at his empty glass. "Damned if I know." But that was a lie too. He did know. He'd been thinking about the look in her eyes when Boone pointed at her, the way she'd sat there, ready to face whatever came, alone, the way nobody in that room had lifted a finger to help her. He'd been thinking about how easy it was to look away, to let bad things happen because they weren't your problem, to choose safety over decency. He'd been thinking about the man he used to be before the war taught him that survival meant keeping your head down and your heart locked up tight. And just for a moment, just for one stupid, reckless moment, He'd wanted to be that man again, even if it killed him. The storm raged all night. Cole didn't sleep. He lay in the stable loft, wrapped in his coat, listening to the wind tear at the walls and the horses shuffle nervously below. His mind wouldn't shut off, kept circling the same questions. What the hell had he done? What was he going to do when Boone came back? How was he going to explain any of this when the truth came out? No good answers came. When dawn finally broke, gray and grudging, the snow had slowed but not stopped. Cole climbed down from the loft, brushed hay off his clothes, and walked back into the saloon. Mei Lin was already awake, sitting at the same table as last night. She'd ordered coffee this time, steam rising from the cup in thin wisps. She looked up when he entered, her face unreadable. "Storm's letting up," Cole said. "We should move soon while we can." She nodded. "I'm ready." They gathered their things, what little there was, and headed out into the frozen morning. The street was buried under 2 feet of fresh snow, the buildings barely visible through the white haze. Cole's horse was in the livery, a big roan gelding named Rust. He saddled up, then helped Mei Lin onto the horse's back before swinging up behind her. It wasn't proper, wasn't how married folks rode, but there was only one horse, and propriety didn't matter much when you were lying about everything else anyway. They rode out of Broken Ridge without looking back. The journey was hell. The wind cut like knives. The snow came in waves, sometimes light, sometimes blinding. The road disappeared completely after the first mile, and Cole had to navigate by memory and instinct, following the shape of the land, the tree line, the way the hills rolled. Mei Lin didn't complain, didn't speak, just held on to the saddle horn and endured. It took 6 hours to cover 15 miles. When the ranch finally appeared through the snow, a dark smudge against the white, Cole felt something unclench in his chest. They'd made it. Barely, but they'd made it. The house was small, 1 room for living, 1 for sleeping, a kitchen that barely deserved the name. There was a barn, a smokehouse, a chicken coop buried somewhere under the snow. It wasn't much, but it was his, and it was shelter, and right now that was everything. He helped Mei Lin down, then led Rust into the barn. By the time he'd unsaddled the horse, rubbed him down, and made sure there was feed and water, he was shaking from cold. Inside, Mei Lin had gotten the stove going. The room was warming up, ice melting off the windows. She stood near the fire, still wearing her black coat, still watchful. Cole shrugged off his own coat, hung it by the door. "There's food in the larder. Not much, but enough. Coffee, too, if you want it. Thank you." An awkward silence settled between them. 2 strangers in a small space, pretending to be something they weren't. Finally, Mei Lin spoke. "I should tell you the truth." "Don't have to." "Yes, I do. You put yourself at risk. You deserve to know why." Cole pulled out a chair, sat down. "All right then, I'm listening." She didn't sit, stayed standing, like sitting meant letting her guard down. "My name is Mei Lin," she began. "I came to this territory 3 years ago, working as a translator for the Northern Pacific Railroad. They needed someone who spoke Cantonese and English, someone who could negotiate with the Chinese labor crews." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I was good at my job. Too good. I started noticing discrepancies. Pay that never reached the workers. Contracts that didn't match what was promised. Accidents that weren't accidents." Cole felt something cold settle in his gut. Someone was skimming. Not just skimming, stealing. Thousands of dollars. And when workers complained, they disappeared. Accidents in the tunnels. Fires. Rock slides. Her voice stayed flat, emotionless. "I started documenting everything. Names, dates, amounts. I kept records. And they found out. Yes. A man named August Brennan. He owns half the railroad contracts in the territory. When he realized what I knew, he tried to buy my silence. When that didn't work, he tried to kill me." She said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. "There was a fire. At the boarding house where I lived, 3 women died. I barely made it out." She looked at Cole directly now, her eyes hard. "That's when I took his ledgers. The real ones. The ones that prove everything." Cole's mind raced. "You still have them?" Hidden. Safe. And Boone? The warrant? Brennan has connections. Friends in law enforcement and government. He manufactured charges, convinced territorial authorities I was the thief, the criminal. Now he's hunting me with the law's permission. Jesus. I've been running for 8 months. I thought I could disappear into the winter, wait it out. But Boone is persistent, and Brennan is patient. She finally sat down, across from him. For the first time, he saw the exhaustion in her face, the weight of months on the run. You should have let Boone take me, she said quietly. You should have stayed out of it. Too late now. It's not too late. I can leave. Tonight. Disappear. You tell Boone I ran. You did your best, but I was gone before you could stop me. Your ranch is protected. Your name is clear. Cole considered it. It was the smart play. The safe play. The kind of decision a man made when he valued his own skin over someone else's trouble. But he'd already made his choice back in that saloon, and something stubborn in him refused to unmake it. No, he said. Why? Because if what you're saying is true, and I believe it is, then Brennan needs to answer for what he's done, and you're the only one who can make that happen. I'm one woman. He's an empire. Then I guess we'll need a good plan. Maylin stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You don't owe me anything. I know. This could ruin you, could get you killed. I know that too. Then why? Cole leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. How did you explain it? How did you tell someone that you'd spent 3 years disappearing, becoming less and less until you could barely recognize yourself in the mirror? That you'd buried your wife and unborn child and decided the world didn't deserve anything more from you? That you'd been waiting to die without admitting it? How did you tell someone that the moment in that saloon, standing up, speaking out, choosing something besides empty survival, had felt like breathing after 3 years underwater? Because I'm tired, he said finally. Tired of doing nothing, being nothing. If I'm going to live out here, alone in the cold, I'd like to at least know I did one thing that mattered. Understanding flickered in Maylin's eyes. Not pity, something else. Recognition, maybe. You lost someone, she said softly, a long time ago. And you blame yourself. Cole didn't answer, didn't need to. They sat in silence, two broken people in a broken world, while outside the snow kept falling and the wind kept howling, and somewhere out there men with guns and warrants kept hunting. 2 days, Maylin said finally. Boone gave you 2 days. When he comes back, we'll figure it out. How? Damned if I know, but we've got until then to come up with something. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. That night, Cole gave her the bedroom and took the floor by the stove. It wasn't comfortable, but he'd slept in worse places. At least here, the roof didn't leak and nothing was trying to kill him. He lay awake, listening to the storm, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. In the other room, Maylin lay awake too, staring at the ceiling, wondering the same thing. Neither of them knew it yet, but the hardest part was still to come. And the lie they'd told? It was about to become more complicated than either of them could imagine. Morning came gray and bitter. Cole woke to the sound of splitting wood. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was, just knew his back ached and his neck felt like someone had wrung it out like a wet rag. Then it all came flooding back. The saloon, the sheriff, the lie that had turned his life sideways. He sat up, joints popping, and looked toward the window. Through the frost-glazed glass, he could see Maylin outside, swinging his axe with surprising competence. She'd already built a small stack of firewood beside the door. He pulled on his boots and coat, stepped out into the cold. The air hit him like a fist, sharp enough to make his eyes water. You don't have to do that, he said. She didn't stop. Brought the axe down clean, splitting a log in one stroke. I don't take charity. It's not charity. You're... He caught himself, about to say, a guest. But that wasn't what they were pretending, was it? You're injured. Saw you favoring your left side last night. Old injury, healed badly. Doesn't stop me from working. She set up another log, swung again. Her form was good, better than good. Someone had taught her how to use an axe properly, how to let the weight do the work instead of forcing it. Cole watched for a moment, then went to check on the chickens. Half of them had frozen to death during the night, despite the straw and burlap he'd packed around the coop. He collected the survivors' eggs, only 3, and brought them inside. By the time Mei Lin came in, he had coffee brewing and cornbread in the pan. She stood in the doorway, brushing snow from her shoulders, studying the small space like she was memorizing exits. "You can relax," Cole said. "No one's coming. Not in this weather." "Someone's always coming." She said it flat, factual. Like gravity or winter. Just another truth of the world. They ate in silence. The cornbread was dry, the coffee bitter. Cole had never been much of a cook, and 3 years alone hadn't improved his skills any. "We need to talk about Boone," Mei Lin said finally. "I know." "He'll be back. 2 days," he said. "Probably less if the weather breaks." Cole nodded. He'd been thinking about it all night, turning it over in his mind like a puzzle with missing pieces. "We need documentation. Something that looks real. A marriage certificate." "Yeah, problem is, I don't know anyone who could forge one. Not well enough to fool Boone, anyway." Mei Lin set down her cup. "I do." He looked at her, surprised. "There's a man in Helena, a printer named Kowalski. He does legitimate work, newspapers, handbills, legal documents, but he also does other work for the right price." "You trust him?" "No, but I know him. He won't turn me in because I know too much about his business. Mutually assured destruction." Cole considered it. Helena was 3 days' ride in good weather. In this? A week, maybe more. And that was assuming the passes weren't completely snowed in. "Even if we could get there, even if he'd do it, we don't have time. Boone's not going to wait a week. Then we buy time." "How?" Mei Lin's eyes were hard, calculating. "We make him believe the lie is true. Not just paperwork. Behavior. We act like a married couple. We make everyone in this territory believe it." Cole felt something tighten in his chest. "You mean?" "I mean we play the part. Completely. When people see us, they see a husband and wife. When Boone investigates, every person he talks to confirms the story. People around here know me, know I've been alone. Then we tell them the truth. Part of it, anyway." She leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "You met me in Helena 2 months ago. You courted me quickly because you were lonely, because you wanted a family again. You kept it quiet because you didn't want judgment, didn't want people's opinions. You brought me here to start fresh. It was a good story. Simple. Believable. The kind of thing that actually happened out here, where loneliness drove men to desperate choices. And when Boone wires Helena, when he checks, by then we'll have the real documentation, backdated, filed properly. By the time anyone thinks to verify, the record will exist." Cole rubbed his face, feeling the rough stubble under his palm. It was crazy. The whole thing was crazy, but it might work. If they sold it hard enough. If no one looked too close. "There's a problem," he said. "What?" "Tom Hadley." Mei Lin waited. "He's my neighbor. Closest one about 8 miles east. He comes by every few weeks to check on me, especially in winter. He knows I've been alone. If he shows up and suddenly I've got a wife, then we tell him the same story we'll tell everyone else. We convince him. Tom's not easy to convince. He's known me since before—" Cole stopped himself. "He's known me a long time." "Then you'll have to be convincing." She said it like it was simple, like lying to a man who'd been a friend for years was just another task to check off a list. Maybe for her it was. The storm picked up again around noon, rattling the windows and piling snow against the walls. They spent the day in careful orbit around each other, finding rhythms in the small space. Mei Lin cleaned her rifle, a Winchester repeater that had seen hard use, while Cole repaired tack and oiled his own guns. They didn't talk much. Didn't need to. But Cole found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, the way her hands moved on the rifle, practiced and sure. The way she kept her back to the wall even when they were alone. The way her eyes tracked every sound, every shift in the wind. She'd been running a long time. Long enough that survival had become reflex. That night, she took the floor by the stove without argument. Said the bed was too soft, made her feel exposed. Cole didn't push it. He understood, in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Sometimes comfort felt like a trap. He lay in his own bed, their bed now, according to the lie, and stared at the ceiling. In the other room, he could hear her breathing. Slow, controlled. The breathing of someone who'd learned to sleep light and wake ready. "Cole?" Her voice came soft through the darkness. "Yeah? Why did you really do it? In the saloon, the truth this time." He thought about it. About all the true answers and the lies he could tell himself. "I saw you sitting there," he said finally, "alone. Everyone staring, but nobody helping. And I remembered what that felt like, being the thing people looked at but didn't see. Being the problem nobody wanted to claim." He paused. "I guess I didn't want you to feel that way, not if I could stop it." Silence. Then, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For making you remember." Cole didn't know what to say to that. So he said nothing, and eventually her breathing evened out into something that might have been sleep. But he lay awake a long time after, thinking about the person he used to be and the person he'd become, and the strange space in between where he currently existed. The weather broke on the third day. Not completely. The sky was still bruised and heavy, but enough that the wind died down and the snow stopped falling. Cole went out to check the fences, make sure nothing had collapsed under the weight. Mei Lin came with him, moving through the deep snow with grim determination. They were halfway to the north pasture when they saw the rider. Cole's hand went to his gun automatically. Mei Lin froze, her eyes tracking the figure approaching through the white landscape. "Tom Hadley," Cole said, recognizing the horse and the heavy bearskin coat. "Damn it! The neighbor you mentioned. Yeah. Then we start now." She moved closer to him, not touching, but near enough that it looked like proximity born of familiarity. Cole understood. They were performing now. Every movement mattered. Tom Hadley rode up on his big buckskin mare, his weathered face breaking into a grin when he saw Cole. "Mercer, thought you might have frozen to death out here. Came to check on—" He stopped, noticing Mei Lin. His smile faded into confusion. "Who's this?" Cole felt his throat go dry. This was it. The first real test. "Tom, this is Mei Lin, my wife." The words felt strange in his mouth, foreign, like speaking a language he'd only half learned. Tom stared. "Your wife?" "That's right." "Since when do you have a wife?" "Since 2 months ago. We got married in Helena." Tom looked from Cole to Mei Lin and back again, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been hurt. 2 months? And you didn't think to mention it? Didn't think to invite your oldest friend? "We kept it quiet," Cole said, hating how the lies came easier now. "Didn't want a fuss." "A fuss?" Tom's voice was flat. "You get married, you who swore you'd never marry again, and you call it a fuss?" Mei Lin stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than Cole had heard it before. Warmer. "It was my fault. I asked him to keep it private. I'm not comfortable with attention." Tom looked at her properly for the first time. His expression shifted, something in it softening. "You're Chinese." "Yes." "Must have been hard. People talk." "Let them talk," Mei Lin said simply. "I have Cole. That's enough." She said it so naturally, so convincingly, that for a moment Cole almost believed it himself. Tom studied them both, his eyes sharp beneath heavy brows. He was a smart man, Tom. A careful man. Not easy to fool. "How'd you meet?" he asked. Cole's mind raced. They hadn't prepared for this, hadn't worked out the details, but Mei Lin didn't hesitate. "A boarding house in Helena. I was working there cleaning rooms. He came in during a storm, stayed 3 days. We talked." She glanced at Cole, and there was something in her eyes. Not warmth, exactly, but the memory of warmth. A performance of remembered feeling. "He was kind. That's rare. And you just married her? Just like that?" Cole forced himself to meet Tom's stare. "I was lonely. She was alone. Sometimes that's enough." It was the truest thing he'd said, and maybe that's why Tom's face shifted. The suspicion didn't disappear, but it loosened, became something closer to concern. "You could have told me," Tom said quietly. "I thought we were friends." We are. I wasn't ready for questions, for opinions. I wouldn't have judged. Everyone judges, Tom. You know that. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. Well, congratulations, I guess. Hope you know what you're doing. Me too. Tom looked at Mei Lin again. You know what you're getting into? This man's about as social as a rock. Lives out here alone because he prefers it that way. I prefer it too, Mei Lin said. Cities are loud, crowded, dangerous. Dangerous how? She met his eyes steadily. I had trouble. Before I met Cole. Bad trouble. He helped me leave it behind. It was brilliant, Cole realized. She was telling pieces of the truth, just rearranged, making the story real by building it from real things. Tom's expression darkened. What kind of trouble? The kind that doesn't matter anymore, Cole cut in. She's safe now. That's what counts. Tom looked like he wanted to push, but something in Cole's voice stopped him. Instead, he shifted in his saddle, nodded slowly. All right, your business is your business. But if you need anything, if either of you need anything, you know where to find me. I know, thanks, Tom. Tom started to turn his horse, then paused. There was a sheriff in town, day before the storm hit, asking questions about a Chinese woman. You hear anything about that? Cole's blood went cold, but he kept his face neutral. Heard something. Boone was looking for someone. Fugitive, he said. He say who? Some name I didn't recognize. Why? Just wondering. Seemed pretty determined. Tom looked at Mei Lin. You didn't have any trouble with the law, did you? No, Mei Lin said calmly. Whatever he's looking for, it's not me. Tom nodded, but his eyes lingered on her face for a moment too long. Then he tipped his hat and rode off, his horse kicking up clouds of powder snow. They watched him go in silence. When he was out of sight, Mei Lin let out a breath. He didn't believe us. No, but he didn't call us liars either. He'll talk. Tell people in town. That's good, builds the story. But it also means Boone will hear about it. Let him hear. That's the point. Cole turned to face her. You were good. That whole performance. It wasn't a performance. He raised an eyebrow. Not completely, she amended. The best lies are built on truth. I did work in a boarding house. Briefly, you were kind, or at least you were to me, and I am alone. She started walking back toward the house, her boots crunching through the snow. The only lie was making those facts into a love story. Cole followed, something uneasy turning in his gut. Is that what we're selling? A love story? That's what people want to believe. Lonely rancher, mysterious woman, romance in the wilderness. She glanced back at him. It's easier than the truth. Which is? Two damaged people making a desperate gamble that'll probably get them both killed. She said it without emotion, without drama, just stating facts. They worked through the afternoon in tense silence, hauling water from the well, feeding the animals, reinforcing the chicken coop against predators. The work was hard and cold and necessary, the kind of labor that kept you alive through winter whether you wanted to be alive or not. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, what little sun made it through the clouds, Cole started fixing dinner, salt pork and beans, same as always. Mei Lin sat at the table, methodically cleaning snow from her boots. We need to go into town, she said. Cole looked up from the stove. Why? Because married couples go into town. They're seen together. They buy supplies together. If we stay hidden out here, people will wonder why. Or they'll just think we want privacy. For a week? 2? How long before someone decides that's suspicious? She set her boots aside. We need to be visible, normal, boring. Boone's in town. Exactly, which is why we go. We show him we have nothing to hide. Cole's jaw tightened. That's a hell of a risk. Everything about this is a risk, but if we act guilty, we are guilty. If we act like a normal married couple, we might survive long enough to get proper documentation. She was right. He hated it, but she was right. Fine, he said. We'll go tomorrow. Get supplies, show our faces, come home. Quick and simple. Nothing about this is simple. No, Cole agreed. But we can pretend it is. That night, something shifted between them. Maybe it was the performance for Tom, the way they'd slipped into their roles so easily. Maybe it was exhaustion, the constant tension of the lie wearing them both down. Or maybe it was just proximity, two people in a small space learning to exist together. They sat by the stove after dinner, the only light coming from the fire. Mei Lin had pulled her hair down from its usual tight bun, and it fell dark and straight past her shoulders. She looked younger like this, less like carved stone, more like a person who might laugh or cry or feel things that didn't involve survival. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said. "You can ask." "The railroad, Brennan. Why not just go to the authorities, the real authorities, not local sheriffs, federal marshals, territorial governors? Give them the evidence." Mei Lin was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was tired. "I tried. In the beginning. I went to the marshal's office in Helena. I had documents, testimony from workers, everything." She stared into the fire. The marshal listened, took notes, said he'd investigate. 2 days later, his deputy came to arrest me. The charges were already filed: theft, fraud, murder. Murder? One of the workers I'd been helping. He died in a tunnel collapse. They said I'd convinced him to sabotage the supports, that the collapse was my fault. Her hands curled into fists. It was a lie, but it was an official lie, signed and sealed. And my word, the word of a Chinese woman against a wealthy white businessman, meant nothing. Cole felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. "So you ran. What else could I do? Stay and hang for crimes I didn't commit?" She looked at him directly. "I took what evidence I could and disappeared. I've been trying to find someone I can trust, someone with enough power to actually challenge Brennan. But everyone's either bought or scared." "What about the ledgers? You said you had proof." "I do. Hidden. Safe. But proof means nothing without someone willing to act on it." "Where are they hidden?" Mei Lin smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You think I'll tell you? I think we're in this together now, whether we like it or not." "Are we?" She tilted her head, studying him. "Or are you just playing a part until it gets too dangerous?" "I stood up to Boone for you. I'm lying to everyone I know. I'm risking my land, my freedom, maybe my life. What more do you want? I want to know why. And don't tell me it's because you saw me sitting alone. There's more to it than that." Cole stood up, restless energy pushing him to his feet. He paced to the window, looked out at the darkness. "I had a wife," he said finally. "Her name was Sarah. We had a ranch in Wyoming, smaller than this one. We were happy. Or happy enough. She got pregnant our second year. We were excited, scared but excited." He could feel Mei Lin watching him, but he didn't turn around. There were complications. The baby came early. The doctor was in town, 20 miles away. I rode for him, rode as fast as I could. But the snow was bad, the roads worse. By the time we got back, he stopped, swallowed hard. She bled out. The baby never took a breath. I buried them both on a Tuesday in March, in ground so frozen I had to use a pickaxe. The room was silent, except for the crackle of the fire. After that, I sold the ranch. Couldn't stay there. Couldn't look at the house without seeing her. I drifted for a year, drinking mostly, fighting, doing everything I could to disappear. He turned to face Mei Lin. Then I bought this place, middle of nowhere. No neighbors, no memories, just silence. And you've been hiding here ever since. I wasn't hiding, I was surviving. Is there a difference?" The question hit harder than it should have. Cole didn't have an answer. Mei Lin stood up, walked over to where he stood. She was close enough now that he could see the faint scar on her temple, the tiredness around her eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "But I'm not her. I'm not someone you can save to make up for her. This isn't redemption." "I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to fix something that can't be fixed. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just tired of being a coward." They stood there, 2 feet apart, the space between them charged with things neither of them wanted to name. "We should sleep," Mei Lin said finally. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." She moved away, settling onto her bedroll by the stove. Cole went to his own bed, lay down in the darkness. But sleep didn't come easy. He kept thinking about what she'd said, about redemption and cowardice and the difference between saving someone and hiding behind them. And he thought about the way she'd look standing in that saloon, alone against the world, and how something in him had broken watching it. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was about Sarah, about guilt he couldn't shake. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he was just tired of being empty. The ride into Broken Ridge took 4 hours through snow that had packed down hard and slick. They rode together on rust, Maylin in front now, Cole behind, his arms around her waist to keep them both balanced. It was necessary for riding, practical for safety, but it felt like something else. Neither of them mentioned it. The town looked different in daylight, smaller, sadder. The buildings hunched against the cold like beaten dogs, smoke rising thin from chimneys. A few people moved on the streets, bundled against the wind. They hitched Rust outside the general store. Cole helped Maylin down, his hand lingering on her arm longer than strictly necessary. Playing the part. That's all it was. Inside, Mrs. Chen looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening when she saw them together. Mr. Mercer. And, friend? My wife, Cole said. Maylin Mercer. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. She was Chinese herself, one of the few families that had stayed after the railroad work ended. Her husband ran a laundry service. She managed the store. Wife, she repeated, switching to Cantonese. When did this happen? Maylin answered in the same language, too fast for Cole to follow with his limited understanding, but he caught enough. 2 months. Helena. Private ceremony. Mrs. Chen's expression cycled through surprise, suspicion, and finally something that looked almost like approval. It's good, she said in English, for Cole's benefit. Good, you're not alone. Both of you. They bought supplies, flour, coffee, sugar, ammunition. Mrs. Chen packed everything carefully, her eyes darting between them like she was trying to solve a puzzle. The sheriff was here, she said casually, asking about a woman. Maylin didn't flinch. What woman? Chinese woman. Dangerous, he said. Wanted for crimes. Did he find her? Mrs. Chen smiled, sharp and knowing. How would I know? All you people look the same to him. It was a joke, but it had teeth. Cole saw Maylin's mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but close. They were loading the supplies onto Rust when Boone appeared. He came from the direction of the sheriff's office, his badge catching weak sunlight. 2 deputies flanked him, hands resting on their gun belts. Mercer. Boone's voice carried across the street. Got a minute? Cole forced himself to stay calm. Sheriff? Boone's eyes moved to Maylin, lingered, and the wife. Convenient she showed up just when I came asking questions. Not convenient, just timing. Funny kind of timing. Boone stepped closer. I've been asking around. Seems nobody in this town knew you were married. Nobody at all. Told you. We kept it private. Private, right. Boone pulled out the warrant again, unfolded it. Says here the woman I'm looking for is around 30 years old, Chinese. Goes by Maylin. Common name, Maylin said. Is it? Wouldn't know. Don't meet many Chinese folks. Boone's smile was cold. But I'm learning. For instance, I learned that there's no record of a marriage between Cole Mercer and anyone in Helena County records. Checked myself. Cole's stomach dropped, but he kept his face neutral. Lines are still down. You couldn't have checked. Lines came back up this morning. First thing I did. Boone stepped closer, close enough that Cole could smell tobacco and old leather. So I'll ask you one more time. Where's the marriage certificate? Being filed takes time. How much time? As much as it takes. They stared at each other, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then Maylin spoke, her voice calm and clear. Sheriff, I understand your suspicion, but I'm not the woman you're looking for. I'm Cole's wife. If you need proof, we can provide it, but harassment is an investigation. Boone's jaw tightened. This ain't harassment. This is law enforcement. Then enforce the law, but do it with evidence, not assumptions. For a moment, Cole thought Boone might actually arrest them both right there. His hand twitched toward his gun, his face darkening. But then Tom Hadley's voice cut through the tension. "Problem here, Sheriff." Tom had appeared from somewhere, the saloon maybe, or the feed store, and now stood a few feet away, his presence solid and deliberate. "No problem," Boone said tightly. "Just asking questions." "Seems like more than questions." Tom looked at Cole. "Everything all right?" "Fine. Sheriff's just doing his job." Tom nodded slowly, but he didn't move, didn't leave, just stood there. A quiet statement of solidarity that surprised Cole more than he wanted to admit. Boone looked between them, calculating. Finally, he stepped back. "2 days are up," he said. "Next time I come asking, I want answers, real ones, not stories." He turned and walked away, his deputies following. The street seemed to exhale. "Thanks," Cole said to Tom. Tom shrugged. "Don't like bullies. Never have." He looked at Mei Lin. "You holding up all right?" "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern. That sheriff's not going to let this go." "I know." Tom studied them both, then nodded. "Watch yourselves, both of you." He walked away, leaving Cole and Mei Lin standing in the cold street, the weight of what just happened settling over them like fresh snow. "We need to leave," Mei Lin said quietly. "Now, before he comes back with more questions we can't answer." They rode hard out of Broken Ridge, the supplies rattling in the saddlebags. Neither spoke until the town disappeared behind them. When they finally stopped to rest the horse, Mei Lin turned to look at Cole. "The marriage certificate," she said. "We need it now, not later. Now." "I know." "Which means Helena, which means risk." "I know that too." "Can you write it alone, faster without me?" Cole shook his head. "No. We go together. We're married, remember? That's the story. Married couples don't split up when things get hard." She almost smiled. "Some do." "Not us. Not if we want this to work." Mei Lin looked back toward Broken Ridge, hidden now by distance and snow. "Then we leave tomorrow, first light. And we don't stop until we have what we need." Cole nodded. The lie was growing, spreading, taking on a life of its own. And somewhere in the middle of it, buried under layers of performance and necessity, something real was beginning to take shape. Something that scared Cole more than Boone or Brennan or any warrant ever could. They never made it to Helena. The decision came at dawn, while Cole was saddling Rust and Mei Lin was checking her rifle for the third time. The sky had that particular quality of gray that promised more snow, and the wind carried a bite that went straight through wool and leather. "We're being watched," Mei Lin said quietly. Cole's hand stilled on the cinch strap. "Where?" "Northeast Ridge. Has been for the last hour. One rider, maybe two." He didn't ask how she knew. She had instincts for this kind of thing, the kind you developed when staying alive meant noticing details other people missed. "Boone's men? Probably. Or Brennan's. Does it matter?" It didn't. Either way, they couldn't head for Helena with someone tracking their movements. They'd lead whoever it was straight to Kowalski, compromise the one source they had for documentation, and probably get themselves killed in the process. "We stay then," Cole said. "Change of plans." "And do what? Wait for them to come get us?" "No. We make them come to us, on our terms." Mei Lin looked at him, something sharp and evaluating in her eyes. "You have an idea?" "Half of one, which is better than none." He told her what he was thinking. It wasn't elegant, wasn't even particularly smart, but it had the virtue of being bold enough that nobody would expect it. When he finished, Mei Lin was quiet for a long moment. "That's insane," she said finally. "Yep. It'll probably get us both killed. Probably. And if it works, we'll have made enemies of some very powerful people. Already have. Might as well make it official." She almost smiled. Almost. "You're crazier than I thought." "That a yes?" Mei Lin checked her rifle one more time, then slung it over her shoulder. "It's a yes, but if we die, I'm blaming you." "Fair enough." They rode out an hour later, but not toward Helena. Instead, they headed south, toward the railroad camp at Sweetwater Junction. It was a 3-day ride in good conditions, maybe 4 in the snow. The camp was where Mei Lin had worked, where she'd first discovered Brennan's scheme, where everything had started falling apart. It was also where the evidence was hidden. "You kept it there?" Cole asked when she finally told him. "At the place they'd most expect you to go?" "Nobody expects you to go back to the place that tried to kill you. That's what makes it safe." The logic was twisted but sound, like most of what Mei Lin did. They traveled carefully, watching for pursuit but never seeing it directly, just hints. Boot prints in the snow that weren't theirs, smoke from a campfire a mile off, the feeling of eyes on their backs that neither of them could shake. On the second night, camped in a grove of pines with rust tied nearby, Cole finally asked the question that had been eating at him. "What's in these ledgers, exactly?" Mei Lin fed another stick into their small fire. They'd kept it small deliberately, just enough for warmth and to heat water for coffee. Anything bigger would be visible for miles. "Names," she said. "Dates, amounts, every payment Brennan skimmed from worker wages, every bribe he paid to inspectors, every accident that wasn't an accident with notes about who ordered it and why. And he kept records of all this? Rich men always keep records. They think money makes them untouchable, so they get careless, arrogant." She poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handed one to Cole. "I was just a translator to him, invisible. He didn't think I could read English well enough to understand what I was seeing. But you could." "My father was a merchant in San Francisco. He taught me English, arithmetic, how to keep books. He said knowledge was the only thing they couldn't take from you." Her voice went flat. He was wrong. They took everything, but the knowledge stayed. Cole wanted to ask what happened to her father, but didn't. Some stories didn't need telling. They sat in silence, drinking bitter coffee and listening to the wind move through the trees. In the distance, a wolf howled. Russ stirred nervously and Cole got up to calm him. When he came back, Mei Lin was staring into the fire, her face unreadable. "You should leave," she said. "We've been over this. I'm serious. When we get to Sweetwater, you should take the ledgers and go. Give them to someone who can use them. A newspaper, a federal marshal, anyone." "And leave you there?" "I can disappear. I've done it before. Not well enough. They found you in Broken Ridge. Because I got careless. I won't make that mistake again." Cole sat down across from her, close enough to see the firelight reflected in her eyes. "You really think I'd do that? Take what you risked everything for and just leave you?" "Why wouldn't you? It's the smart play. You get to be the hero who exposed corruption. I get to vanish into the wilderness. Everyone wins. Except you. I'm used to losing." The words came out matter-of-fact, like she was discussing weather. That bothered Cole more than if she'd been angry or bitter. "Well, I'm not," he said. "Used to losing, I mean. Not anymore. I lost enough for one lifetime." "So you're doing this for yourself then? To feel better about your dead wife?" It was cruel, meant to push him away. Cole recognized the tactic because he'd used it himself, back when he was drinking himself to death in Wyoming. Say something harsh enough and people stopped caring, stopped trying to help, left you alone with your damage. "Maybe," he admitted. "Maybe I'm trying to fix something that can't be fixed. But even if that's true, even if this is all just me being selfish, you still get to live. The evidence still gets exposed. Brennan still goes down. So what's it matter why I'm doing it?" Mei Lin looked at him for a long moment. "It matters because when this is over, you'll realize I'm not her. I'm not someone worth saving, and you'll regret ever getting involved." "Let me worry about my regrets." She turned back to the fire, done with the conversation. But Cole saw something in her face before she turned away, something that looked almost like hope, buried under layers of resignation and self-preservation. They reached Sweetwater Junction on the 4th day, just as the sun was setting. The camp sprawled along the railroad tracks like a festering wound, all mud and canvas tents and rough timber buildings thrown up fast and built to last just long enough. Smoke rose from a dozen fires, and the smell of unwashed bodies and human waste carried on the wind. Most of the Chinese workers were gone now, replaced by Irish and Scandinavian immigrants willing to work for slightly better wages. But some remained, too poor or too stubborn to move on. They lived in a separate section of camp, segregated by invisible lines that everyone understood and nobody questioned. "We can't just ride in," Mei Lin said. "Someone will recognize me." "Then we wait for dark. Go in quiet." They found a spot in the hills overlooking the camp and settled in to wait. Cole watched the activity below, men finishing their shifts, heading to the saloons and gambling tents, looking for any distraction from the brutal monotony of railroad work. "Where's the evidence hidden?" he asked. "Supply shed. North side of camp, there's a false bottom in one of the crates, marked with a red X." "That's it? Just sitting there?" "Nobody looks in supply sheds unless they're stealing. And the foreman who runs that shed is Chinese. He knows me, knows what I did. He won't say anything." "You trust him?" "I trust that he hates Brennan as much as I do." The sun dropped below the horizon, taking what little warmth it provided. The temperature plummeted, and Cole pulled his coat tighter. Beside him, Mei Lin was perfectly still, watching the camp with the focus of a hawk watching prey. When full dark came, they moved. They left Russ tied in the hills and went on foot, carrying as little as possible. Just their guns, a single lantern they wouldn't light until necessary, and the knife Cole kept strapped to his leg. The snow was deep enough to muffle their footsteps, but not so deep they couldn't move quickly. The camp was laid out in rough grids. The supply sheds clustered on the north perimeter away from the main activity. Most of the workers were in the saloon tents now, their voices carrying in drunken songs and arguments. A few men still worked, loading equipment onto flat cars, but they weren't paying attention to the shadows. They made it to the supply shed without incident. The door was locked with a simple padlock. Cole pulled out his knife, worked the tip into the mechanism. It took 30 seconds of careful pressure before the lock clicked open. Inside, the shed was crammed with crates and barrels and tools in various states of repair. Mei Lin lit the lantern, keeping the flame low, and moved directly to a stack of crates in the back corner. "Here," she whispered. Cole helped her shift the top crates aside. The one she wanted was underneath, marked with a faded red X that you'd never notice unless you knew to look for it. She pried open the lid. Inside, beneath a layer of railroad spikes and iron fittings, was a leather satchel wrapped in oilcloth. Mei Lin pulled it out, unwrapped it carefully. The satchel was intact, the leather still supple. She opened it, checked the contents. 3 ledger books, their pages covered in neat handwriting and columns of numbers. "Still here," she breathed. "I didn't think—" She didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Cole was about to suggest they leave when he heard voices outside. They both froze. "Told you, I saw someone go in there." "You're drunk." "Not that drunk. Someone's in the supply shed." Footsteps crunched through snow, getting closer. Cole looked around quickly. No other exit, no windows large enough to climb through. They were trapped. Mei Lin's hand went to her rifle. Cole grabbed her wrist, shook his head. Shooting their way out would bring the entire camp down on them. The door rattled. "It's unlocked. See? Told you." The door swung open. 2 men stood silhouetted in the doorway. Railroad workers by their clothes, carrying lanterns of their own. They saw Cole and Mei Lin and stopped, surprised. "The hell are you doing in here?" one of them demanded. Cole stepped forward, putting himself between them and Mei Lin. "Looking for my wife's cousin. Heard he was working this camp. In the supply shed?" "Got told to check here first, sorry. Didn't mean to trespass." The men looked at each other, uncertain. One of them raised his lantern higher and the light fell on Mei Lin's face. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Hey, I know you. You're that Chinese girl who used to translate, the one who ran off." "You're mistaken," Mei Lin said calmly. "No, I ain't. I remember you. Everyone said you stole from Brennan, tried to burn down the office." "I didn't steal anything, and I didn't set any fires. That's not what I heard." The man's hand drifted toward his belt. Cole saw the knife hanging there. "We're leaving," Cole said, his voice hard. "Right now. You boys go back to your drinking. Forget you saw us." "I don't think so." The man stepped forward. "There's a reward for information about you. $500. That's more than I make in 6 months." His companion looked nervous. "Tommy, maybe we should—" "Shut up!" Tommy's eyes were on Mei Lin now, calculating. $500. Split 2 ways. That's still— He didn't finish the sentence. Maylin moved faster than Cole had ever seen her move. One moment she was standing still. The next she had Tommy's arm twisted behind his back and her knife at his throat. "My husband told you to leave," she said quietly. "I suggest you listen." Tommy's companion stumbled backward, terrified. "Jesus, Tommy!" "Here's what's going to happen," Maylin continued, her voice perfectly calm. "You're going to walk away. You're going to forget you saw us. And you're going to keep your mouth shut. Because if you don't, if I hear even a whisper that you talked, I will come back, and I won't be kind." She let him go, stepped back. Tommy clutched his throat, eyes wide. For a moment, Cole thought they might actually fight. Tommy looked angry enough, humiliated enough. His hand went to his knife again. Then Maylin raised her rifle, not pointing it at him, just holding it, ready. Tommy's hand fell away from his knife. "Come on," he muttered to his companion. "Ain't worth it." They left, walking fast but not running. Trying to salvage some dignity, Cole let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "We need to move, now, before they change their minds or tell someone." They grabbed the satchel and ran. The camp was still loud with Saturday night drinking, but Cole felt exposed with every step. Someone would notice. Someone would sound an alarm. Any second now, they'd hear shouts, gunfire, pursuit. They made it to the edge of camp before the shouting started. Not behind them. Ahead. A group of men appeared from between two buildings, blocking their path. 6 of them, maybe 7, carrying rifles and lanterns. And at the front, wearing a heavy fur coat and a smile like broken glass, was a man Cole didn't recognize, but Maylin clearly did. Her whole body went rigid. "Maylin," the man said pleasantly, "it's been too long." "Brennan." So this was him. August Brennan. The railroad baron, the thief, the man behind everything. He was shorter than Cole expected, stocky and balding, with the kind of face that looked friendly until you saw his eyes. Those were cold as January ice. "I have to admit, I'm impressed," Brennan continued. 8 months on the run, and you managed to stay hidden better than I anticipated. But you always were resourceful." He nodded toward the satchel. "Come to retrieve your stolen property?" Not stolen. Evidence. Evidence. Such a loaded word. Evidence of what, exactly? Murder. Theft. Everything you've done." Brennan laughed. It was a warm sound, genuine, the kind of laugh that belonged at dinner parties and church socials. It made Cole's skin crawl. "My dear girl, even if such evidence existed, and I'm not saying it does, who would believe it? A Chinese translator with a criminal record accusing a respected businessman? You'd be laughed out of any courtroom in the territory." "Then why are you here?" Maylin's voice was steady, but Cole could feel the tension radiating off her. "Why hunt me for 8 months if you're not worried?" "Because loose ends annoy me, and because you embarrassed me by running. No one embarrasses August Brennan." His men spread out, forming a loose circle, trapping them. Cole did quick math. 7 against 2. 7 rifles against 1 rifle and a pistol. 7 men who knew they'd get paid for bringing Maylin in, dead or alive. The odds weren't good. "I'll make you a deal, Seats," Brennan said. "Give me the ledgers and I'll let your friend here walk away. He doesn't need to die for your mistakes." "He's not my friend. He's my husband." Brennan's eyebrows rose. "Husband? Really? How wonderfully romantic. A fugitive and a—" He looked at Cole properly for the first time. "What are you exactly? Failed rancher? Drunk? Man with nothing left to lose?" "All 3, Cole said. "Plus, I don't like bullies." "How quaint. Tell me, Mr. Mercer. Tell me, Mr. Mercer, is she worth dying for? Because that's what's about to happen if you don't walk away." Cole looked at Maylin. Her face was set, determined. Ready to fight even though fighting was suicide. He thought about the lie they'd told, about playing husband and wife, about the strange space they'd been living in, somewhere between performance and truth. And he realized the performance was over. This was real now. "Yeah," he said to Brennan. "She's worth it." Brennan sighed like he was genuinely disappointed. "Pity. I was hoping you'd be sensible." He raised his hand, about to give the order to fire. That's when the shot rang out. Not from Brennan's men. from somewhere else, somewhere behind them. One of Brennan's men dropped, clutching his shoulder. The rest scattered, diving for cover, their formation breaking. More shots. Multiple shooters, by the sound of it. Cole grabbed Mei Lin's arm, pulled her behind a stack of lumber. Bullets whined through the air, smacking into wood and dirt. "Who the hell?" he started. "I don't know." The gunfight was chaos. Brennan's men were shooting at shadows, trying to figure out where the attack was coming from. The mysterious shooters, whoever they were, kept firing from darkness, muzzle flashes visible, but no clear targets. "We need to move," Cole said. While they're distracted, they ran, keeping low, using the confusion as cover. Behind them, the shooting intensified. Someone screamed, glass shattered. A horse reared and bolted, dragging a supply cart with it. They made it to the hills, to where Rust was tied, and Cole practically threw Mei Lin into the saddle before jumping up behind her. He kicked the horse into a gallop, and they tore away from Sweetwater Junction as fast as the terrain would allow. The sounds of gunfire faded behind them. They didn't stop until they were miles away, until the horse was lathered and heaving, and they were both shaking from adrenaline and cold. Cole slid off Rust, his legs barely holding him. Mei Lin dismounted more gracefully, but even she looked shaken. "What just happened?" Cole demanded. "Who was shooting?" "I don't know. I swear I don't know." "Someone just saved our lives." Or tried to kill Brennan and didn't care if we got caught in the crossfire. It was possible, but something about it felt deliberate, timed too perfectly. Mei Lin clutched the satchel to her chest, the ledgers safe inside. "We need to keep moving. Brennan knows we have these now. He'll come after us with everything." "Then we don't run. We use them." "How? You heard him. No one will believe me." "Then we make them believe." An idea was forming in Cole's mind. Reckless and half-formed, but better than nothing. "We don't take this to some federal marshal or territorial judge who might be in Brennan's pocket. We take it to the people." "What people?" "Everyone. Workers, towns, every newspaper in Montana Territory. We expose him so publicly, so completely, that he can't buy his way out of it." Mei Lin stared at him. "That's insane. We'd have to travel to dozens of towns, convince dozens of editors. So we convince one. The biggest one. The Helena Independent. They've got distribution across the whole territory. One story in their paper, and everyone knows." "And you think they'll just print it? Based on ledgers that could be forged? Not just ledgers. You. Your testimony. Your story. We give them everything, and we do it publicly enough that Brennan can't make it disappear." It was crazy. The kind of plan that only worked in dime novels and fever dreams. But Mei Lin was nodding slowly, and Cole could see her mind working, finding the angles, calculating the risks. "It could work," she said finally. "If we can get to Helena, if we can get the editor to listen, if we can survive long enough to tell the story." "That's a lot of ifs." "Yes." "You want to try anyway?" Mei Lin looked down at the satchel, at 8 months of running and hiding and fighting compressed into 3 leather-bound books. "Yes," she said. "I want to try." They rode through the night, pushing Rust harder than they should have, knowing that somewhere behind them Brennan and his men were organizing pursuit. The storm had started again, snow falling thick and fast, which helped cover their trail but made traveling treacherous. Dawn found them in a narrow canyon, the walls rising steep on either side. Cole knew this place. It was a shortcut to the Helena Road, a risky path but faster than going around. They were halfway through when they heard riders behind them. "How many?" Mei Lin asked. Cole listened. The echo made it hard to judge. "At least 4, maybe more." "Can we outrun them?" "Not on one horse, not with Rust already tired." The canyon narrowed ahead, the walls closing in until they'd have to ride single file. Beyond that was open ground, but they'd never make it that far with riders on their tail. Cole made a decision. "You keep going," he said. "I'll slow them down." "No." "Mei Lin, I said no." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were fierce. "We do this together or not at all. One of us needs to survive, needs to get those ledgers to Helena. Then we both survive." The riders were getting closer. Cole could hear them clearly now, hoofbeats echoing off stone. "All right," he said. "Together." but we need a plan better than shoot them and hope. Mei Lin looked around, calculating. The canyon walls were steep but not unclimbable in places, and there was a spot ahead where boulders had fallen from above, creating cover. There, she said. We make them come to us. Narrow their advantage. They dismounted, led Russ to shelter behind the rocks, and took positions. Cole on the right, Mei Lin on the left, rifles ready. The wait felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Then the riders appeared around the bend. 5 of them. Brennan's men, wearing heavy coats and carrying Winchester rifles. They saw rust, saw the rocks, and slowed. "Mercer," one of them shouted. "We don't want trouble. Just hand over the girl and the ledgers, and you can walk away." "Not happening," Cole shouted back. "Don't be stupid. You're outnumbered, outgunned. There's no way you're getting out of this canyon alive." "Then I guess we'll die here." The man sighed like he was dealing with a stubborn child. "Have it your way." They spread out, taking cover behind rocks and scrub brush. The canyon had turned into a battlefield. For a long moment, nobody moved. Just 2 sides watching each other, waiting for someone to make the first mistake. Then one of Brennan's men shifted position, trying to get a better angle, and Mei Lin fired. The shot echoed like thunder. The man dove back into cover, cursing. All hell broke loose. Bullets ricocheted off stone, whining through the air like angry hornets. Cole fired, levered another round, fired again. Mei Lin was methodical, picking her shots, making every bullet count. But they were running out of ammunition, and Brennan's men were advancing, slowly, carefully, using the terrain to their advantage. Cole reloaded, his hands shaking from adrenaline. They couldn't hold this position much longer. Sooner or later, one of those bullets would find its mark. He was about to suggest they retreat deeper into the canyon when he heard it. A different sound. Not gunfire, something else. Horses. Lots of them. Coming from the Helena side of the canyon. Brennan's men heard it too. They stopped advancing, looking back uncertainly. Then Sheriff Boone rode into view. He had a dozen men with him. Some wearing deputy badges, some not. All armed. They formed a line across the canyon, blocking any retreat. Cole's heart sank. Boone had found them. It was over. But Boone wasn't looking at Cole and Mei Lin. He was looking at Brennan's men. "You boys are trespassing," Boone said, his voice carrying. "This is territorial land, and you're engaged in an armed assault on civilians. That's a crime." One of Brennan's men stepped forward. "We're working for August Brennan. We have authorization. I don't care if you're working for the president himself. Drop your weapons. Now." They hesitated. Boone's men raised their rifles. Slowly, reluctantly, Brennan's men lowered their guns. Cole couldn't believe what he was seeing. He looked at Mei Lin. She looked equally stunned. Boone dismounted, walked past the disarmed men, and approached the rocks where Cole and Mei Lin were sheltering. "You can come out," he said. "It's safe." They emerged slowly, rifles still ready, not quite trusting this. Boone looked at them both, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at the satchel Mei Lin was clutching. "That what I think it is?" he asked. "Depends what you think it is," Mei Lin said cautiously. "Evidence. Against Brennan. The evidence I've been trying to find for 2 years." Cole and Mei Lin exchanged glances. "You've been investigating Brennan?" Cole asked. "Hell yes, I've been investigating him. Did you think I was stupid?" Boone shook his head. "That warrant I had? It was real. But it was also bait. I was hoping you'd lead me to proof, and damned if you didn't do exactly that." "You used us," Mei Lin said. "I used a bad situation to maybe get a good outcome. There's a difference." He held out his hand. "Now, you going to give me those ledgers, or are we going to stand here arguing while Brennan gets word of what happened and disappears?" Mei Lin looked at Cole. He could see the question in her eyes. Trust him or run? Cole thought about everything that had happened, about the lie that had become truth, about the performance that had become real. "Give him the ledgers," he said. "Cole, not to keep, to use. He's right. Brennan's going to run if we don't move fast." Mei Lin held Boone's stare for a long moment. Then, slowly, she handed over the satchel. Boone opened it, looked at the ledgers, and smiled. It was the first genuine smile Cole had ever seen on his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he said softly. "You actually got them." What happens now, Cole asked. Now? Boone closed the satchel. Now I arrest August Brennan, and you two get to be heroes, whether you like it or not. Heroes. The word tasted wrong in Cole's mouth as they rode back toward Broken Ridge with Boone's men flanking them like an honor guard. He caught Mei Lin's eye and saw his own skepticism reflected there. They'd been fugitives yesterday. Today, they were heroes. The shift was too sudden, too clean. Nothing in life changed that fast without a price. Boone rode at the front, the satchel secured in his saddlebag, looking satisfied in a way that made Cole's teeth ache. Behind them, Brennan's men rode in chains, their horses roped together in a line. Defeated, captured. Too easy. I don't trust this, Mei Lin said quietly, leaning back so only Cole could hear. Neither do I. Boone's been investigating Brennan for 2 years, he says, but the warrant he had for me was real. The charges were real. He was ready to arrest me. I know. So which is it? Is he trying to bring down Brennan, or is he working for him? Cole didn't have an answer. The whole thing felt like a knot he couldn't untangle. Boone had saved them, sure, but he'd also hunted them, used them as bait without asking, and now he had the only evidence that could destroy Brennan. We need those ledgers back, Cole said. How? He's got 12 armed men. We've got 2 rifles and maybe 30 rounds between us. I don't know. But we can't let him be the only one with that evidence. If it disappears, then 8 months of running meant nothing, I know. They rode in tense silence after that, watching Boone's back and wondering what came next. The town appeared through the snow like something out of a bad dream. Word had spread somehow, it always did in small towns, and people lined the street despite the cold. Faces Cole recognized. Tom Hadley, Mrs. Chen, McCready from the saloon, others he'd seen but never spoken to. They were all staring. Boone reined up in front of the sheriff's office, dismounted with theatrical precision. He was performing now, Cole realized, playing to the crowd. Folks, Boone called out, his voice carrying. Today is a good day for justice. These men, he gestured to Brennan's captured crew, work for August Brennan. The same Brennan who's been bleeding this territory dry for years, stealing from workers, bribing officials, murdering anyone who got in his way. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Shock, anger, disbelief. And these two, Boone pointed at Cole and Mei Lin, they're the ones who brought the proof. Cole Mercer and his wife risked everything to expose the truth. His wife, the lie again. But this time it didn't feel like a lie. It felt like something else, something that had weight and consequence and reality beyond the words. Tom Hadley pushed through the crowd, his face troubled. Boone, what's this about? You were hunting her not 3 days ago. Called her a criminal. I was following orders, Boone said smoothly. Bad orders from corrupt officials in Brennan's pocket. But when Mr. Mercer stood up and vouched for his wife, I started asking questions, started investigating, and what I found, he patted the saddlebag, is enough to put Brennan away for life. It was a good story, neat, heroic, the kind of story people wanted to believe. Cole didn't believe a word of it. We need to talk, he said to Boone. Private. Boone's smile tightened just slightly. Of course, my office. He turned to his deputies. Lock these men up, get statements, I'll be inside. They followed Boone into the small office and he shut the door behind them. The smile disappeared immediately. Say what you need to say, Mercer. The truth. What's your angle here? No angle. I'm doing my job. Bullshit. You had a warrant with her name on it. Real charges filed by real officials. You were going to arrest her. I was going to make it look like I was arresting her, Boone corrected. Then quietly let her go and follow to see where she led me. But you complicated things by claiming she was your wife. So you're saying you've been on our side this whole time. I've been on the side of justice. Whether that's your side depends on whether you're telling the truth about those ledgers. Mei Lin spoke up, her voice hard. Let me see them. Excuse me? The ledgers. Let me verify they're still intact, that nothing's been changed or removed. Boone's jaw tightened. For a moment, Cole thought he'd refuse. Then he opened the saddlebag and pulled out the satchel, tossed it onto his desk. Mei Lin opened it, checked each ledger carefully. Her fingers traced the pages, looking for anything out of place. After a long minute, she nodded. They're intact. Satisfied? Not even close. You say you've been investigating Brennan for 2 years. Where's your evidence? Where's your case file? Boone walked to a locked cabinet, pulled out a key, opened it. Inside were folders thick with papers. He pulled one out, dropped it on the desk beside the ledgers. 2 years of witness statements, financial records, incident reports that didn't add up. I've been building this case piece by piece, but I never had the proof I needed. The kind of proof that couldn't be dismissed or buried. He looked at Mei Lin. Until you stole his ledgers. I didn't steal them. I secured evidence of crimes. Call it what you want. Point is, together we've got enough to bring him down, but only if we work together. Cole picked up the folder, flipped through it. The documents looked real, detailed, years of work compiled into hundreds of pages. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. Why the games? Because I didn't know if I could trust you. Still don't, entirely. For all I knew, you were working for Brennan, setting a trap. That's paranoid. That's survival. Brennan's bought off sheriffs before, judges, marshals. I couldn't risk approaching you directly until I knew what side you were on. It made a sick kind of sense. In a world where money bought loyalty and corruption ran deep, trust was a luxury nobody could afford. So what happens now? Mei Lin asked. Now I send a telegram to Helena. Federal marshals, territorial prosecutor. We make this so public, so official that Brennan can't make it disappear. Boone looked at them both. But I need you to testify, both of you. Tell your story, how you got the ledgers, what you saw, all of it. Our story, Cole said slowly, includes the fact that we're not actually married. Boone waved that away. Don't care. As far as anyone needs to know, you got married in Helena 2 months ago. Records are being filed as we speak. Cole and Mei Lin exchanged glances. You forged a marriage certificate, Mei Lin said. I had one created through proper channels using backdated paperwork, legal in every way that matters. Boone leaned forward. Look, I know you two aren't really married. I'm not blind. But the story works better if you are. Gives you credibility. Makes you victims instead of criminals. And right now, we need you to be victims. I'm not a victim, Mei Lin said flatly. Then you're a hero, a whistleblower, a brave woman who risked everything for justice. Pick whichever role you like, but play it well, because if this falls apart, we all go down. The office felt too small suddenly, too hot. Cole wanted air, wanted space to think, but there wasn't time for any of that. How long before Brennan hears about this? He asked. He probably already knows. He's got people everywhere, but knowing and doing something about it are different things. He'll run or he'll fight. Either way, we need to move fast. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of Boone's deputies stuck his head in. Sheriff, got a telegram from Helena. Boone took the paper, read it, and his face went pale. What? Cole demanded. Brennan's already in Helena, has been for 2 days. Boone looked up. He knew. Somehow he knew we were coming for him. That's impossible, Mei Lin said. We only got the ledgers yesterday. He's been planning his escape. Had to be. This telegram says he's liquidating assets, calling in favors, preparing to leave the territory. Boone crumpled the paper. If he runs, we'll never catch him. Then we don't let him run. They all turned to look at Mei Lin. He wants the ledgers back, she continued. He needs them. Without them, we have testimony and circumstantial evidence. With them, we have proof he can't explain away, so we use them as bait. Bait how? Boone asked. We let word spread that they're here, in your office, under guard but accessible, and we wait for him to come get them. That's insane. He'd never risk it himself. He won't have to. He'll send men, lots of them. And when they come, we'll be ready. Cole saw where she was going and didn't like it. You want to turn this town into a battlefield. I want to end this now, before he disappears, and we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Boone was nodding slowly. It could work. We fortify the office, spread the word through channels we know Brennan's watching, set a trap. And when his men come? Cole asked. What then? We shoot it out in the middle of town? People could get hurt, killed. People are already getting hurt, Mei Lin said. Workers in those camps. Families who've lost fathers and sons to Brennan's accidents. This ends one way or another. Better it ends here, where we choose the ground. She was right. Cole hated it, but she was right. How many men can you trust? He asked Boone. For this? Maybe 10. 15 if I stretch it. Brennan could send 50. Then we'll need to be smart about it. Boone moved to the window, looked out at the town. We've got maybe 12 hours before word reaches Helena. Less if he's already heard about the canyon fight, which means we prepare fast. The next hours passed in controlled chaos. Boone sent telegrams, called in every favor he had. Deputized men he trusted, Tom Hadley among them, despite his protests. They barricaded the office, moved supplies in, set up firing positions. The whole town watched, uncertain and afraid. Cole worked alongside men he barely knew, reinforcing doors and windows while Mei Lin checked and rechecked their ammunition supplies. They had enough rifles but not enough bullets. Enough determination but not enough time. As the sun started to drop, Tom pulled Cole aside. "This is crazy," Tom said. "You know that, right?" "I know." "We're about to start a war in the middle of Broken Ridge. People are going to die." "Probably." "And you're okay with that?" Cole looked at his friend, his oldest friend, the one who'd stuck by him when everyone else drifted away, and tried to find words that would make sense. "I spent 3 years dying slowly," he said finally. "Buried myself out on that ranch and called it living. And then she walked into McCready's saloon and something in me woke up, something I thought was dead." He paused. "I'm not okay with people dying, Tom, but I'm less okay with going back to being dead myself." Tom studied him for a long moment. "You love her?" It wasn't a question. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I just love having something worth fighting for again." Cole laughed, bitter. "Hell of a thing, isn't it? Taking a stranger's life in your hands and calling it purpose. She's not a stranger anymore." "No, she's not." Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "Then I guess we'd better not die tonight." "That's the plan." Night fell like a curtain, and the temperature dropped with it. Inside the sheriff's office, 15 men waited in tense silence. Outside, the town had gone quiet. People had shuttered their windows, barred their doors. Everyone knew something was coming. Mei Lin sat near the stove, her rifle across her lap, staring at nothing. Cole sat down beside her. "You should eat something," he said, offering dried meat. She shook her head. "Can't. Stomach's too tight." "Scared?" "Terrified. You?" "Same." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Around them, men checked their weapons, muttered prayers, wrote letters they hoped they wouldn't need. "Cole," Mei Lin said quietly, "if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I need you to know—" She stopped, struggling with words. "I need you to know I'm grateful for everything. For the lie that became truth, for standing up when you didn't have to, for being decent when the world's given you every reason not to be. You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. Because after tonight, I might not get another chance." Cole wanted to tell her she was wrong, that they'd survive, that justice would win, that everything would work out. But he'd learned long ago that life didn't trade in happy endings. So instead, he took her hand. She didn't pull away. They sat like that, hands clasped, while outside in the darkness, horses approached. Boone heard them first. He moved to the window, peered through a gap in the shutters. "How many?" someone whispered. "Can't tell. A lot." The sound grew louder. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Coming from the south road. "Positions," Boone ordered. Men moved to windows and doors, rifles ready. Cole and Mei Lin took the east wall where they had a clear view of the street. The riders appeared through the snow like ghosts. 20, 30, maybe more. They spread out in a loose semicircle surrounding the sheriff's office, and at the center, sitting tall on a white horse, was August Brennan himself. "He came," Mei Lin breathed. "He actually came." Cole felt his stomach drop. This wasn't a raid. It was a statement. Brennan wasn't hiding anymore, wasn't sending proxies. He was here, in person, to take back what was his. Brennan's voice carried across the snow. "Sheriff Boone, I believe you have something of mine." Boone stepped outside, alone, standing in the doorway with deliberate calm. "Mr. Brennan, you're under arrest for murder, theft, and conspiracy." Brennan laughed. "Under arrest? By whose authority?" "Territorial law. Federal law. Take your pick. I don't recognize either. Not here, not tonight." Brennan gestured to his men. "I've brought 30 armed workers, good men doing their job, protecting their employer's property from thieves. The ledgers aren't your property. They're evidence." "Evidence of what? Business transactions? Legitimate commerce? You have no authority to seize private documents, Sheriff, and I'm here to reclaim them. Over my dead body. If that's what it takes." The air went cold. 30 rifles against 15. The math was brutal, but Boone didn't back down. "You won't get them. Even if you kill every man in this building, word's already gone out. Federal marshals are on their way, territorial prosecutors, newspapermen. You can't kill all of them." "Can I?" Brennan's smile was terrible. "Sheriff, you seem to think I'm bound by the same rules as everyone else. I'm not. I'm a man of means, of influence. I can make entire towns disappear if I choose. One small sheriff's office? That's nothing. Then why are you here? Why risk showing your face if you're so powerful?" "Because some things require a personal touch." Brennan raised his hand. His men raised their rifles. Inside the office, Cole felt time slow down. This was it. The moment where talk ended and violence began, where all their preparation meant nothing against simple, overwhelming force. He looked at Mei Lin. She was pale but steady, rifle aimed at the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For not being able to give you a better ending." She smiled, sad and fierce. "This isn't the ending, just the hard part before it." Then Brennan's hand dropped and the world exploded. Gunfire erupted from everywhere at once. Bullets shattered windows, punched through shutters, splintered wood. Men screamed. Glass rained down. The stove took a hit and smoke billowed out. Cole fired back, barely aiming, just shooting at muzzle flashes. Beside him, Mei Lin worked her rifle with mechanical precision, each shot deliberate. But they were outnumbered, outgunned, losing. Someone went down behind them, one of Boone's deputies clutching his leg and cursing. Another man slumped against the wall, red spreading across his chest. "We can't hold," Tom shouted. "There's too many." He was right. In minutes, they'd be overrun. In minutes, it would all be over. Then Cole heard something that changed everything. More gunfire, but not from Brennan's men. From behind them, from the north. New riders poured into the street. Dozens of them. Chinese workers from the railroad camps armed with rifles and shotguns in raw fury. Leading them was the foreman from Sweetwater, the one who'd protected Mei Lin's hiding spot. Brennan's formation collapsed. His men wheeled their horses, trying to defend from two directions at once. The Chinese workers didn't hesitate. They'd lost friends to Brennan's accidents, family to his greed. They fought with the desperate courage of people with nothing left to lose. The tide turned. Brennan saw it happening and did what powerful men always do when their power fails. He ran, spurred his white horse, and bolted south, away from the fighting, into the darkness. "No!" Mei Lin was already moving, grabbing her rifle, heading for the door. Cole caught her arm. "Mei Lin, wait. He can't escape, not again. I won't let him." "Then I'm coming with you." They ran to where Rust was tied, both mounting in one fluid motion. Cole kicked the horse into a gallop, following the tracks Brennan's white horse left in the fresh snow. Behind them, the gunfight continued. But ahead, somewhere in the darkness, August Brennan was running for his life, and they were hunting him. The chase led them out of town, into the hills where the trees grew thick and the snow lay deep. Brennan's horse was faster, but Russ knew these trails. Cole pushed him hard, following the tracks by moonlight. They found Brennan a mile out, his horse foundered in a snowdrift. He had dismounted and was trying to pull the animal free when they appeared. He saw them and reached for his gun. Mei Lin's rifle cracked once. Brennan's hat flew off. He froze, hands raised. They dismounted, approached slowly. Cole had his pistol drawn. Mei Lin kept her rifle trained on Brennan's chest. "It's over," she said. Brennan smiled. Even now, even defeated, he smiled. "Is it? You think arresting me solves anything? I have friends, lawyers, money. I'll be out in a week. Maybe, maybe not. But everyone will know what you did. Everyone will know the truth. The truth? Brennan laughed. The truth is that I built this territory. The railroad, the towns, the commerce, all of it exists because of men like me. Men willing to do what's necessary. And you want to destroy that because some workers died? People die. It's the cost of progress. Those weren't costs, Mei Lin said, and her voice shook with rage. They were murders. You murdered them. I did what was required to complete a project on time and under budget, nothing more. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. If you can't see the difference, that's not my problem. Mei Lin's finger tightened on the trigger. Cole saw it happening, saw the rage and pain and 8 months of running crystallize into one moment. Don't, he said quietly. He deserves it. Maybe. But you don't deserve what it'll cost you. He'll get away with it. You know he will. Men like him always do. Maybe, but killing him in cold blood makes you a murderer too, and I don't think that's who you are. Mei Lin's hands shook. The rifle wavered. Then she lowered it. You're right, she said. I'm not a murderer. I'm a witness. And I'm going to make sure everyone hears what I witnessed. They marched Brennan back toward town on foot, his hands tied with rope from Cole's saddle. He walked in silence, but Cole could see his mind working, calculating, planning his next move. When they reached the edge of town, the gunfight was over. Brennan's men had surrendered or fled. The Chinese workers stood in the street, victorious and exhausted. Bodies lay in the snow. 3 of Boone's men, 7 of Brennan's. Too many. But they'd won. Boone met them halfway, his face grim but satisfied. He looked at Brennan, then at the rope binding his hands. August Brennan, he said formally. You're under arrest for murder, theft, conspiracy, and about 40 other charges I'll think of later. You have the right to remain silent, but I doubt you will. Brennan said nothing, just stared at them all with contempt. They locked him in the town's small jail, posted guards, and sent telegrams to every authority they could reach. By morning, the story was everywhere. By afternoon, federal marshals had arrived. By evening, Brennan was on a train to Helena to face trial. And through it all, the ledgers sat in Boone's safe, proof of crimes that could no longer be denied or buried. It was over. Really, truly over. Cole stood outside the sheriff's office 2 days later, watching wagons load up the dead for burial. Tom Hadley approached, looking older than he had a week ago. Hell of a thing, Tom said. Yeah. You leaving? Haven't decided yet. Town could use you, both of you. After what you did, people look up to you. Cole almost laughed. We're not heroes, Tom. We just got lucky. Maybe, but sometimes that's all it takes. Tom walked away, and Cole was left standing in the cold, thinking about luck and choices and the strange path that had led him from isolation to this moment. Mei Lin emerged from the general store, carrying supplies. She saw him and smiled, a real smile, not the careful ones she'd worn like armor. Ready? She asked. For what? To go home. Home. The word settled something in Cole's chest. Not the ranch, not the empty house waiting in the hills, but wherever they went together. Yeah, he said. I'm ready. They mounted Rust and rode out of Broken Ridge side by side, while behind them the town began the slow work of healing, and ahead of them stretched winter sky and possibility. The ranch looked different when they returned. Same weathered barn, same small house with smoke curling from the chimney where they'd left a fire banked. Same frozen landscape stretching white and endless in every direction. But somehow it felt less like a prison, and more like a place where 2 people might actually build something. Cole dismounted first, then helped Mei Lin down. Their hands lingered together a moment longer than necessary before she pulled away, practical as always, moving to unload the supplies they'd bought in town with money Boone had given them. Compensation, he'd called it. Payment for services rendered to the territory. Blood money, Cole thought, but useful blood money. Inside, the house was cold but not frozen. Cole got the stove going properly while Mei Lin put away supplies with the efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste motion. They moved around each other in the small space with an ease that hadn't existed a week ago. anticipating movements, sharing tasks without needing to discuss them. It should have felt comfortable. Instead, it felt fragile, like something that might shatter if examined too closely. I should check the animals, Cole said, needing distance, needing air. I'll start dinner. He stepped outside into the bitter cold and stood there for a moment, just breathing. The adrenaline that had carried him through the gunfight, the chase, the arrests, all of it was draining away now, leaving him hollow and uncertain. They'd won. Brennan was in custody. The evidence was secured. Justice, whatever that meant, was being served. So why did he feel like he'd lost something? The chickens had survived, huddled together for warmth. He scattered feed, checked water that had frozen solid and needed breaking. The work was mindless, familiar, and gave him time to think about the question he'd been avoiding for 2 days. What happened now? The lie that had brought them together was over. They didn't need to pretend anymore. Boone had manufactured the marriage certificate, sure, but that was just paperwork. Legal fiction to protect them both. Nothing required them to stay together now that the danger had passed. Maylin could leave. Go to California, maybe, or back to San Francisco. Start fresh somewhere Brennan's reach didn't extend. She had the railroad foreman's testimony now, other workers willing to speak up. She had her freedom. And Cole could go back to what he'd been doing before, existing in quiet isolation, waiting for time to pass. The thought made him feel sick. He was checking the barn's roof for damage when Mei Lin appeared in the doorway. Dinner's ready, such as it is. Be right there. She didn't move, just stood there, wrapped in her black coat, studying him with those dark eyes that saw too much. You're thinking about leaving, she said. It wasn't a question. Cole climbed down from the ladder, brushed snow from his hands. I'm thinking you should. Leave, I mean. Nothing keeping you here now. Except the fact that I'm legally married to you. Paperwork. Boone said he could dissolve it if we wanted. Annulment. Like it never happened. Like it never happened, Maylin repeated softly. She looked away toward the mountains barely visible through the falling snow. Would you want that? Doesn't matter what I want. Matters what's right for you. That's not an answer. Cole felt frustration rising, the kind born from too many emotions he didn't know how to name. What do you want me to say? That I want you to stay? That I've gotten used to having someone else in the house? Someone to talk to? Someone who doesn't look at me like I'm half dead? He stopped, hearing his voice getting louder. Fine. I want you to stay. Happy? Are you? The question caught him off guard. Am I what? Happy. You said you wanted me to stay, but would that make you happy? Or would you just be replacing one kind of loneliness with another? It was too close to the truth. Cole turned away ostensibly to close the barn door, but really to avoid her eyes. I don't know, he admitted. I haven't been happy in 3 years. Don't know if I remember how. Then maybe that's the problem. Maylin's voice was quiet but firm. You're not asking if I should stay. You're asking if I can fix what's broken in you. And I can't, Cole. Nobody can do that but you. The words hit like a slap, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. They walked back to the house in silence. Dinner was simple. Beans and cornbread again, coffee that was more grounds than water. They ate without speaking, the quiet heavy between them. Finally, Maylin set down her fork. I'm leaving in the morning. Cole's stomach dropped, but he kept his face neutral. Where will you go? San Francisco. I have contacts there. People who knew my father. I can find work, start over. She paused. The foreman from Sweetwater offered to travel with me. Safety in numbers. That's smart. Yes. More silence. Cole pushed food around his plate, not tasting anything. I could come with you, he heard himself say. Help you get settled, make sure you're safe. And then what? You come back here and go back to hiding? Maybe. Or maybe I sell the ranch. Move to San Francisco too. Start over. Running toward something or running away? Cole didn't have an answer. Maylin stood up, started clearing dishes. I'm grateful for everything you did, for the lie that saved my life, for standing up when you didn't have to, for being a good man in a world that doesn't reward good men. She looked at him directly. But I can't be your reason to live, Cole. You need to find that yourself. She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. That night, they slept in separate rooms for the first time since the gunfight. Cole lay awake, listening to the wind and the small sounds of Mei Lin moving around in the other room, packing probably, getting ready to leave. He thought about Sarah, about the baby they'd lost, about all the years he'd spent punishing himself for not riding faster, not getting the doctor in time, not somehow preventing the unpreventable. And he thought about what Mei Lin had said, about replacing one loneliness with another. Maybe that's exactly what he'd been doing. Not falling for her, but falling for the idea of redemption through her. Using her survival as proof that he could save someone, that he wasn't the failure he'd convinced himself he was. That wasn't fair to her, wasn't fair to either of them. Somewhere past midnight, he made a decision. Morning came gray and cold. Cole woke to find Mei Lin already up, her bedroll packed, her few possessions secured in a canvas bag. She'd made coffee and left it warming on the stove. He found her outside, checking the saddle on rust. "I'm taking your horse," she said. "Just to town. Tom said he'd buy him from you, fair price. I can use the money for stage fare. Keep him, gift." "Cole, I'm serious. You'll need a good horse. Rust is the best I've got." She looked like she might argue, then nodded. "Thank you." They stood there awkwardly, two people who'd been through hell together now struggling to say goodbye. "I have something for you," Cole said. He went inside, came back with an envelope. "Money. Not much, but enough to get you started. And a letter. For Boone. Asking him to forward any news about Brennan's trial. Figured you'd want to know how it turns out." Mei Lin took the envelope, her fingers brushing his. "You're a good man, Cole Mercer. Not as good as you think, but I'm trying. That's all any of us can do." She mounted Rust, settled into the saddle with practiced ease, looked down at Cole standing in the snow. "What will you do?" she asked. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe sell this place like I said. Maybe stay. Figure out who I am when I'm not hiding." He managed to smile. "Probably make a mess of it either way." "Probably." She smiled back, sad and genuine. "But that's better than not trying at all." She started to turn the horse, then stopped. "Cole, that night in the office, before the shooting started, you said this wasn't the ending, just the hard part before it." She paused. "What's the ending? For you?" He thought about it, about all the endings he'd imagined over the years, quick ones, slow ones, lonely ones. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm starting to think maybe that's okay, not knowing, just living long enough to find out." Mei Lin nodded, like he'd said something profound instead of just obvious. "Goodbye, Cole. Goodbye." She rode away then, and Cole watched until she disappeared around the bend in the road. Watched until there was nothing left but tracks in the snow and the memory of someone who'd walked into his life like a storm and left it irrevocably changed. Then he went inside, poured himself coffee, and sat down to figure out what came next. The answer came 3 weeks later, in the form of Tom Hadley riding up with a newspaper tucked under his arm and a grin on his weathered face. "You see this?" Tom shook out the paper, the Helena Independent, and pointed to the front page. "Railroad Baron convicted on all counts." The article went on for columns, detailing Brennan's trial, the evidence presented, the witnesses who testified. Mei Lin's name appeared multiple times, so did Cole's. The story painted them as heroes who'd risked everything to expose corruption. Cole skimmed it, feeling uncomfortable with the narrative. It was true, mostly, but it left out the fear and doubt and stupid luck that had carried them through, made it sound noble when mostly it had just been desperate. "They're calling for reforms," Tom said, excited. "New safety regulations, federal oversight of railroad contracts, all because of what you two did. It wasn't just us. The Chinese workers who showed up that night, they're the real heroes." Paper mentions them too, calls them brave laborers standing up against oppression. Oh, Tom folded the paper. "Point is, things are changing, because you didn't look away." After Tom left, Cole read the article again. Then again. And somewhere in the third reading, something shifted in his chest. He'd spent 3 years convinced that nothing he did mattered, that he was too broken, too damaged, too far gone to make a difference, that the world would keep turning whether he participated or not. But he'd been wrong. Standing up in that saloon had mattered. Lying to protect a stranger had mattered. Refusing to back down when smart money said to run had mattered. Small choices, human choices, made by someone who'd convinced himself he was empty but turned out to still have something left to give. Maybe that was the point. Maybe you didn't need to be whole to matter, didn't need to be healed to help, didn't need to be fearless to be brave. You just needed to try. Cole spent the next month working on the ranch with new purpose, not hiding in it, but actually working it. He fixed fences that had sagged, rebuilt the chicken coop properly, even started planning for spring planting, something he hadn't bothered with in years. Tom came by regularly, helping with projects, bringing news from town. Broken Ridge was growing, new families moving in, Chinese workers from the railroad camp settling down now that Brennan's operation had collapsed. The town was becoming something different, something better. "We're having a meeting next week," Tom said one afternoon while they were mending fence, "about incorporating proper, electing a mayor, town council, making this place official." "Good for you. We want you to run for council." Cole nearly dropped his hammer. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "Why? People trust you, respect you. You stood up when it mattered." "I stood up once doesn't make me a leader. Doesn't disqualify you either." Tom grinned. "Besides, what else are you doing? Sitting out here talking to chickens? The chickens are good listeners." "I'm serious, Cole. Think about it." Cole did think about it, and to his surprise, he didn't immediately hate the idea. 2 months after Mei Lin left, a letter arrived. It was forwarded through Boone like Cole had arranged. The envelope was worn from travel, the handwriting precise and careful. Cole sat on his porch, he'd built an actual porch, with real chairs, and opened it. The letter was short. Mei Lin had made it to San Francisco safely, found work with a legal firm that specialized in labor disputes. They were using her testimony from the Brennan case to build other cases against other corrupt operators. She was testifying in court, speaking publicly, becoming someone people listened to. She sounded different in writing, more confident, less guarded. At the end she wrote, "I thought about what you said, about living long enough to find out what the ending looks like. I'm trying to do that too. Trying to be someone worth saving instead of someone who needs saving. It's harder than I expected. But I think you'd understand that." Cole read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where he kept important things. Sarah's wedding ring, his discharge papers from the army. Now this. Evidence that moving forward didn't mean forgetting, just meant carrying the past differently. Spring came reluctantly, as it always did in Montana. The snow melted into mud, the mud dried into dust, and slowly the world turned from white to brown to the tentative green of new growth. Cole planted crops for the first time in years. Just a small garden, nothing ambitious. But it felt like something. Like planting seeds meant believing there'd be a future to harvest them in. He took Tom's advice and ran for town council. Won by a narrow margin, probably because most people were too surprised to vote against him. The work was tedious and frustrating and exactly the kind of normal he'd been avoiding for 3 years. He liked it. Through it all, he thought about Mei Lin. Not obsessively, not painfully, but the way you think about someone who'd changed your life and then moved on with theirs. He wondered if she thought about him, wondered if she was happy. In June, the Helena Independent ran another story. This one about labor reform legislation being debated in the Territorial Congress. Mei Lin's testimony was mentioned prominently. There was a sketch of her standing in front of lawmakers, looking small but fierce. Cole cut out the article and put it with the letter. Summer brought heat and work and the slow rhythm of ranch life. Cole hired help, 2 young Chinese men who'd worked for the railroad and were looking for steadier employment. They were good workers, quiet and competent. One of them, Chen, was teaching Cole Cantonese, slowly and with much laughter at Cole's terrible pronunciation, but teaching him nonetheless. In August, another letter arrived. This one was longer. Mei Lin wrote about her work, about the cases they were winning, about the slow progress of reform. She wrote about San Francisco, the noise, the crowds, the way she sometimes missed the silence of Montana winters. And she wrote, "I'm enclosing something. Don't laugh." Tucked into the envelope was a photograph, a formal portrait. Maylin sitting in a chair wearing a dark dress, her hair styled differently than Cole remembered, but her eyes were the same. Still seeing too much, still carrying the weight of everything she'd survived. On the back she'd written, "So you can remember I'm real, not just a story you tell yourself." Cole put the photograph on his mantle where he could see it every morning. That fall, the verdict from Brennan's appeal came through. Conviction upheld. 30 years in territorial prison. No possibility of parole. The railroad companies he'd owned were being liquidated, the proceeds going to workers' families. Justice, real and imperfect and insufficient to undo the damage but better than nothing. Cole celebrated quietly with Tom, drinking whiskey that didn't taste like saddle leather and talking about nothing important. It felt good, normal, like something men did when they weren't busy dying inside. In November, the first real snow fell. Cole stood on his porch, their porch. He still sometimes thought of it and watched white cover the world again, erasing tracks, starting fresh. He thought about writing to Maylin, thought about telling her that he'd figured some things out, that he'd learned you could carry grief without drowning in it, that you could honor the dead by living instead of dying slowly out of guilt, but the words wouldn't come. So instead, he just stood there feeling the cold and being okay with it. Winter settled in properly by December. Cole spent Christmas with Tom's family, uncomfortable with the noise and warmth, but grateful for the invitation. He was learning, slowly, to be around people again, to participate in life instead of just observing it. The new year came, 1886, a number that meant nothing except it was one more year he'd survived, one more year he'd chosen to keep going. In February, on a Tuesday morning so cold the air hurt to breathe, a stage pulled up to his ranch. Cole was in the barn, mucking stalls, when he heard it. He walked out, squinting against snow glare, and saw a figure climbing down from the stage. Small, wearing a heavy black coat, moving with careful precision through the deep snow. His heart stopped. Maylin saw him and stopped walking. They stood there, maybe 20 feet apart, looking at each other across winter landscape. "I should have sent word," she called out, "but I wasn't sure until I was already on the stage." "Sure about what?" "About whether I wanted to come back." Cole walked toward her, closing the distance. She looked different, not drastically, but in small ways. She stood straighter, smiled more easily, carried herself like someone who'd stopped running. "Why did you?" he asked. "Come back, I mean." "Because I spent 8 months in San Francisco being the person everyone needed me to be. Brave victim, star witness, symbol of reform." She looked up at him. "And I was good at it. I helped people, made a difference. But I wasn't happy." "You don't have to be happy. Just being alive is enough." "Is it though? Is just surviving actually living?" She shook her head. "You told me once that you were tired of doing nothing, being nothing. That if you were going to live out here alone, you wanted to at least know you'd done something that mattered." "I remember. You were right. Doing something matters, but you were wrong about the alone part. Being alone isn't noble. It's just lonely." Cole felt something unclench in his chest, something he'd been holding tight for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I testified at 16 trials, helped pass 3 new labor laws, became someone people respect, and none of it felt as real as standing in a saloon in the middle of nowhere, watching a stranger lie to protect me." She smiled. "I'm saying maybe the ending isn't in San Francisco giving speeches. Maybe it's here, if you'll have me." Cole thought about all the reasons to say no, about how he was still broken in ways he didn't fully understand, about how she deserved someone whole and healed and sure of themselves, but he also thought about the photograph on his mantle, about the letters in his drawer, about the way he'd spent a year learning to live again, not because he'd forgotten the past, but because someone had shown him the past didn't have to be a cage. "We're already married," he said. "Legally, anyway. Boone never filed the annulment." "I know. I checked. So technically, you live here already?" "Technically. And technically, you promised to be my wife, for better or worse." "I don't recall that part of the ceremony." "It's implied. Mei-Lin laughed, a real laugh, surprised and delighted, and the sound of it was better than anything Cole had heard in years. "Then I suppose I should keep my promise," she said. "Implied or otherwise." Cole closed the last few feet between them and took her hand. Not as performance, not as pretense, just as a choice. "Welcome home," he said. "Thank you." They stood there in the snow, two damaged people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and somehow made it mean something. Behind them, the stage driver cleared his throat pointedly. "You want your bags or not, lady?" Mei-Lin didn't look away from Cole. "Yes, please. I'm staying." The driver muttered something about crazy people and love-struck fools, but he brought down her trunk and bags anyway. Inside the house, Cole helped her unpack while catching her up on everything that had happened. The ranch improvements, the town council, Chen and his partner who were helping run the place, the small, normal details of a life that was slowly becoming something worth living. "You built a life," Mei-Lin said, looking around the house that was warmer and cleaner and more lived in than when she'd left. "A real one. Trying to anyway, still figuring it out. We'll figure it out together." That night they sat by the fire, a proper fire in a properly maintained stove, and talked about the future, about expanding the ranch, maybe, about Mei-Lin's legal work, and whether she could continue it from Montana, about children someday, or maybe not, about all the choices available to people who'd stopped running and started living. "Do you think we're fooling ourselves?" Cole asked. "Thinking we can make this work?" "Probably, but we've been fooling everyone else for months. Might as well fool ourselves too." "That's not very romantic." "Romance is overrated. I prefer honesty." Cole smiled. "Then honestly, I'm terrified this won't work, that I'm too damaged, that you'll realize you made a mistake coming back." "Honestly? Me too. But I'm more terrified of playing it safe and wondering what if." Mei-Lin looked at him directly. "We're not broken, Cole. We're just people who've been through hell and survived. That's not the same thing." Shastam ichiktamnas. It wasn't profound wisdom, wasn't some grand revelation, just two people acknowledging that survival wasn't the same as living, and living meant risking pain again. But sometimes the simple truths were the ones that mattered most. Spring came again, and with it, the future they were building. Cole expanded the ranch with Mei-Lin's help. She started taking legal consultation work by mail, helping workers across the territory navigate disputes and contracts. They built a life that was ordinary and extraordinary in equal measure. Tom came by one afternoon in April to find them working side by side, mending fence in the warm sun. "You two look domestic," he observed. "We're married," Cole said. "Domestic comes with the territory. Legally married for real this time." Cole and Mei-Lin exchanged glances. "Define real, Mei-Lin said. Tom laughed. "You're telling me you're still pretending?" "Not pretending, just choosing not to make it official. The paperwork's official. Boone filed it properly months ago." "But we never had a ceremony, never said vows." Cole shrugged. "Doesn't feel real without that." "So have a ceremony, I'll round up witnesses, we'll make it official." And that's exactly what they did. On a Saturday in May, in front of Tom and his family, Mrs. Chen and her husband, Boone, and half the town council, Chen and his partner, and anyone else who wanted to watch, Cole Mercer and Mei-Lin stood in the small church in Broken Ridge and got married. For real this time. The ceremony was simple. No grand speeches, no elaborate promises. Just two people who'd survived the worst and chosen each other anyway, saying words that mattered because they chose to make them matter. "I take you as you are," Cole said. "Damaged and fierce and exactly what I need." "I take you as you are," Mei-Lin echoed. "Broken and healing and someone worth fighting for." They exchanged rings, simple silver bands that Kowalski, the printer, had made, the same man who'd forged their original marriage certificate. He'd done these legitimately, as payment for the work they'd done exposing Brennan, everything coming full circle. When it was over, when they'd signed the register and accepted congratulations and endured Tom's terrible speech about love conquering all, they rode back to the ranch together. Home. Really and truly home. That night, sitting on the porch they'd built together, watching the sun set over mountains that had witnessed everything, Maylin turned to Cole. "Do you think we'll be happy?" she asked. Cole thought about it. About Sarah and the baby he'd lost. About 3 years of dying slowly. About the moment in the saloon when he'd chosen to stand up instead of look away. About every choice since then that had led to this moment. "I think happy is overrated," he said finally. "I think alive is better. Engaged. Choosing to try even when it's hard. That's what matters." "That's a terrible answer." "I know, but it's honest." Maylin smiled. "Then I'll take it." They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged in the darkening sky. Two people who'd met as strangers, become partners in survival, and chosen to be something more. Not because they needed each other to be whole, but because being together made the world feel less empty and the future less frightening. That was enough. More than enough. In the distance, a wolf howled. Rust answered from the barn. The wind carried the smell of coming rain. And on a small ranch in Montana territory, two people who'd learned the hard way that survival wasn't living began the messy, imperfect, beautiful work of building something real from the wreckage of everything they'd lost. They didn't get a perfect ending. Life didn't work that way. But they got a real one. And in the end, that mattered more than any lie they'd ever told. Because the truth they'd found, that broken people could still choose each other, that damaged hearts could still beat strong, that the worst things you survived didn't have to define everything that came after. That truth was worth every risk they'd taken. Cole looked at Maylin, his wife in truth and law and choice. "Ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "No, but I'll face it anyway." "Together?" "Together." And that simple word, that simple promise, was the best ending either of them could have asked for. Not happily ever after. Just together, facing whatever came next, one difficult choice at a time. That was enough. That was everything.